Where we're not finding a lot of our students coming from are funeral directors kind of saying to them like, hey, you could do this job, or they're shadowing or things like that. My best students, though, are the ones that a funeral director told them, hey, you can do this. And if you think about this, this makes sense because this younger generation, they're so looking for mentorship and they're so looking for that kind of like connection. So if someone believes in them, like a funeral director, they'll take that and run with it. The number one reason why millennials and Gen Z stay at a job is their boss. So that's the same for getting them into a profession as well, too. So you're seeing this like real uptick and they're coming in and they don't have kind of the necessary ideas of what it even means to be a funeral director. So they're kind of finding it by accident. A lot of times. What I would love to see is that the reason why they came, our number one reason would be, hey, I interned at a funeral home, or I had a summer job at a funeral home, or I walked into a funeral home, or I know a funeral director in my community and he or she is wonderful and I thought I could do this job as well too.
Welcome to the Direct Cremation Podcast with your hosts, Tyler Yamasaki and Will DeMichaelis. Hi, thank you for joining us on the Direct Cremation Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Yamasaki, CEO of Parting Pro. And as always, I'm here with my co-host, Will DeMichaelis, former manager of the Omega Society, a cremation brand that serves over 4,500 families per year. Today's guest is a licensed funeral director and licensed attorney in Illinois. She's also the program director and owner of Worsham College of Mortuary Science and an expert on the Gen Z workforce in the industry. We're happy to have her on the podcast to discuss the changing workforce in death care and what you should consider when hiring, managing, and retaining young professionals in the death care industry. Lily, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you, Lily. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So, Lily, Worsham College graduates, I think it's about 10% of death care.
Yeah. So
new death care. Yeah.
Yes. So there are 58 mortuary science programs that are accredited in the country. Worsham is one of them. And last year we graduated more than any other in the country, any other students in the country. And that's about 10%. So thank you. I know we're pretty excited about that. We've been around for over 100 years. But to me, it's not just about kind of the length of your program, but kind of what you're doing now. And we're seeing kind of the enrollment kind of going up. But again, consistency with graduation, I think that's kind of interesting. Something I find interesting that I had no idea before I got into this field was that you only have about 1,500 graduates in the entire country. So like I said, we've got those 58 programs, but across the country nationally, you're seeing every year about 1,500 graduates entering the field. And those are going to be the graduates that have kind of the dual background of licensed funeral director, licensed embalmer. So any accredited program, the students are getting both of those kind of aspects.
Awesome. That's so impactful to be graduating that many people. And you're actually going to be, having a huge hand in shaping death care going forward.
You're right. And it's kind of what gets me to work every day. It's exciting because it's interesting because I know right now the job market is tough. And if you are looking to hire right now, my background too, we also have a funeral home. So I kind of see both sides of it. Like I get to see all the students that are in our program and how excited they are about getting into the workforce. But also as an employer, I also see it too. And I go, wow, we got a lot of work to do. So there's that really kind of tough balance because that new employee is different. It's not bad. They're just a little bit different. So I can see it from both perspectives because we also want to hire the best and the brightest and retain them. But we're also kind of going, oh, this is a little bit different. Like I need to teach you how to answer the phone. I didn't think I'd need to do that. So there's a lot of like scaffolding and a lot of mentoring that needs to happen for this younger generation. Just because they've just been taught differently. They've just kind of grown up a little bit differently. So you definitely see that kind of balance right there as well too. But I am excited. And, one of the other things too that I'm fascinated by is that right now, our last graduating class, 72% were women. And that's tracking across the country as well too. So overall, mortuary science graduates last year, 72% were women, which is just wild when you think about that. And that number keeps going up. About 2 years ago, we were at 68%. So that number keeps kind of transitioning up as well too.
Wow.
I have a question to kind of dig in there.
Yeah.
Is there a root cause for that? Is it like maybe similar to other professions like nursing or anything in like the compassion or empathy field? Is that attracting the women, or is something else about the industry? Or do you have any insight there based on what you've talked to your graduates or students about?
You know what I think it is, truthfully, is that we're seeing more ability and flexibility in education. So, for example, online education, the ability to pursue it in different fashions. Traditionally, mortuary science was a very face-to-face, classroom-based program. That's what we did for, 90% of the time that we've had a program. We just started seeing our online. And I think what you start to notice is that more and more women can do that because a lot of them have kids. A lot of them are second career. So I do believe that flexibility in education has really allowed for a lot more women. I was just at a conference and I was talking to a student that's at a different program. And she has 3 kids and is working from home, essentially. So that flexibility, I think, is something. And also the fact that this was always a dream for a lot of people and that they're able to kind of pursue that now is another avenue.
Wow, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the online education aspect and kind of that flexibility allowing people who wouldn't have entered the industry to enter the industry.
Yeah, we're seeing about 50% of graduates now are going online, which is just, again, remarkable when you think, and that's again, nationally, not just kind of at Worsham. We're certainly seeing that trend too. But when you start to think about that, it really just opens up the doors for a lot more people that weren't necessarily able to kind of take that year off and go to school.
I gotcha.
I know once we start on this, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, I know.
And before we do that, I really want to hear a little bit about you, Lily. Like, how did you find yourself in the profession? And also not only just getting into the profession, but also becoming in a position where you're having such an impact on death care.
Oh, thank you.
As the owner. Yeah.
It's one of those things that when I was younger, I didn't even know you had to go to school to become a funeral director. I didn't even know that it was really a job. I don't think I really thought much about it. I was very lucky. I didn't have kind of any kind of life experiences that kind of walked me into a funeral home and was like, this is what I need to do. I was actually in law school at the time. Now, I had this opportunity to go to mortuary school, and I looked at it and I thought, well, why not? And you might say, well, that's an odd leap. Like, why would someone even do that? When I did my undergrad, I was really interested in becoming a forensic anthropologist. And I found out you had to go to med school. And I thought, well, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go to law school instead. I can do that. So I was political science, philosophy, double major at Lehigh. And then after that, I went to law school at Syracuse. And that's when I kind of had this opportunity to go to mortuary school because someone had reached out and said, there is a school that's right, essentially like 15 minutes from where I was going to law school. And I thought, well, at least let me look at it. Here's an opportunity. I should take a chance and see what this is all about. So I called the school. And they said, you know what? It's great. We're enrolling right now. I said, right now? I'm in law school. And they're like, yeah, jump in. And I thought, why not? If I hate it, I can always quit. I don't have to do this anymore. But I ended up enrolling in a mortuary school. So Monday through Thursday, I went to law school at Syracuse. And then Friday and Saturday, I went to mortuary school. I would literally finish up constitutional law, get on my scrubs, and head over to mortuary school and do all of that. But I loved it. For me, it was one of those things where I was just learning so much. And then how I got into kind of the education side of it was I had to take a mortuary law class, which makes sense because they didn't have a comparable class at Syracuse. So I'm taking mortuary law. And I went and talked to kind of the program director at the school. And I said, you might want to think about having somebody else teach this class, maybe an attorney or something like that. And they said, well, how about you? And I said, oh, no. It's a terrible idea. Absolutely not. Terrible idea. Law. But of course, I'm one that always likes to jump in and try it. And so I said, well, okay. So that year I actually got married, took the bar exam and took the boards, and then started teaching at Simmons Institute, which is out in New York. And I took over their kind of law program. I knew I'd stay out there for a little bit. And then we were moving kind of across the country back to Illinois, to Chicago, to take over my husband's family funeral home. So that's kind of the step into, my husband and I did this at the same time. So we come back, we're now in Libertyville, right outside of Chicago. And I thought, you know what? I really like teaching. I'll see if there's another mortuary school. There just so happened to be Worsham College, which was about 15 minutes from where we live. So I thought, why not? I'm just going to call up and say, hey, I did this before. If you need anybody, I'd be happy to help out. Give them my resume. I have a quick call with them, and their law program, they already have teachers, everything like that. But they liked me. So they said, come in. And they said, well, we'll just figure out a position for you. You can kind of just work here part-time. So that's what I started doing. But I started seeing that there were these different things I could do. So for example, I noticed that the students didn't have email addresses here and things like that. I said, well, would you mind if I set that up? And they're like, you can do that. I said, I'd love to. I'll do it. So I did that. I noticed that they were a .com when I started. I said, well, can you be a .edu? I was like, why don't I do that? They're like, you can do that. I said, yes, I can. So I just figured out little things, and I got more and more involved in the education side, but I started to see all these opportunities for growth. And I started seeing like, oh my gosh, could we make things more practical? Because one of the things about law school that always got me was we always learned how not to do things. So contract law was about contracts that failed, right? And like it was, you never learned how to write a good contract. So I thought we're doing the same thing in mortuary science a little bit. You know, we're learning from the textbooks. We're learning kind of like the very formulaic, like, here's how you fill out the forms and here's this, but we're not having that interaction piece. And what I realized, we need to start adding that in more. So I started saying, could I do this? Could I do that? And they said, yes. And then the owners were actually looking to sell, and they came up to me and they said, do you want it? And I thought, what? Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, do you want to buy the college? And I said, I am not a trust fund kid. I do not know. It's like buying a zoo. Like, I didn't know you could buy schools. I didn't know you could do anything like that. So that's exactly what happened, though. Within about, from me being here less than 2 years, I took over ownership. But one of the things that was really important to me was that the story be about the growth of the college and the growth of the programs and things like that. So we actually kept it really quiet in the beginning, because here I was coming in, I'm young. I didn't go to Worsham. You know, people are going to go, what's wrong with this school? Like, is everything okay? And I wanted it to be about what is possible. So in that time, we built the online program. And instead of just building an online program, we designed something completely new and different, one that's actually being recognized nationally for kind of excellence in online education, about how we've been able to integrate we were called the little program that could, right? Like, just kind of scrappy and putting it together. But it's really made an impact and kind of opening up the doors for students. And I wanted people to see that, you know, look, mortuary science education can be different. It can evolve, it can change, and it can take the feedback from what needs to happen from the funeral directing side, right? The things that we hear from all the directors. We need more of this. We need soft skills. We need students that are better in communication. They need to know how to talk, to communicate. And we're able to take those things in and make things happen with that. So I've always tried to see that education can change, and it should, and we should be at the forefront of that. So that's a little bit of my story, how I got here, what I'm doing. And then from there, I now sit as the chair of the Committee on Accreditation. And what that is that kind of helps to oversee all the mortuary science programs in the country. I was really excited to take on that role to kind of see what we were able to do. I've also been able to lecture kind of around the country to talk about, you know, the workforce and kind of hiring and retention. And I tell our students all the time, like, I'm out there speaking because I think it's important to bridge that gap, to kind of help, to help kind of transition from, as an elder geriatric millennial, trying to help, our older funeral directors kind of navigate this new world and go, don't worry. We're not all living in our parents' basements eating avocado toast and like eating Tide Pods. I promise. Like, with a little bit of help, we can actually get there, and we can actually change this profession and make it even better. So I get excited about all of that.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice, and that's great. That's awesome, Lily.
Yeah, it's really refreshing to hear that feedback loop that you implemented, where you hear feedback from essentially your customer or past customer, and then implement the changes to make your program better.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things we did too is making sure on our advisory board, I have public members. So I have people from industry partners. I have all sorts of kind of stakeholders, because I think that's really important. Because if we just listen to ourselves, then, you really don't see outside of it, and you miss things. So even something, as simple as, making sure we have funeral directors. I have older funeral directors, younger funeral directors from all over the country. But then I also have people from a bank. I have people from, social media, like all different kind of aspects and elements, so that we're looking at it to kind of go, okay, how do we make sure that we're meeting all of the needs and not kind of having these blind spaces, and these blind spots that we're not addressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really know of any other mortuary science program that's that involved in thinking about death care education as something that can continuously evolve. I kind of always hear the same curriculum, and not a lot of discussion even around revisiting the merits of what's in the curriculum, what should be adjusted based on the landscape of where these kids are actually going to be working and what those managers and owners really need from them. And likewise, the students of their new managers. So that's really refreshing to hear.
Well, that's such a great point. And, I will say, what I find interesting too is all of our directors out there, they've graduated from these programs. And a lot of times like that distance between like, graduation and then you're working and everything like that, you kind of go, well, it's probably exactly as it used to be, right? There's not a lot of changing. And yeah, a lot of the textbooks are the same and a lot of the topics are the same. But I will say the American Board does go through every single outline and every single curriculum on essentially a rotating basis. So there is no more than about 4 years before every single outline is reviewed to make sure that it's actually accurate. We're adding things in and making sure that we're doing it. But I tell everybody, what that is that it's like being kind of given the foundation for a building. So all of us, every single mortuary science program has essentially that same foundation. What you do with it and how you teach it and how you start to integrate that and how you start to kind of go through that, that's up to the individual programs. So there's that beautiful flexibility. So we know that all the students are getting the same kind of basics, but at the same time, how you grow it and how you kind of take that information and make it your own and how you empower your instructors. That's the other thing too. Most all of our instructors are licensed funeral directors and embalmers, and they're phenomenal. Like what they do, they're really good at it. So they're able to bring in that real world experience, because that's so much of it is understanding through story and through kind of the practical piece that they actually get better at what they do. So all of our instructors are licensed as well too. Almost all. There's a couple that are not, but for the most part, every single one of them are.
Awesome. I know we were talking a little bit earlier about who's graduating and who's entering the schools. Do you have some interesting demographic information about the students that are coming in that may be different from, what we would expect or maybe even 10 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one thing that we kind of always talk about is definitely the women, right? Women entering in the profession, which I think is really an interesting and important thing. Why I think it's important is that even, I started to mention this too, is about schedules. And if you look at it, about 50% of the women that are just in the workforce in general have children under the age of 18. And what that really means is that they have a lot of stuff they have to do as far as like dealing with schooling and things like that. I have 2 daughters myself. I don't think there is a single month of the year that we do not have some days off from school or this or that. And a lot of people that are coming from working households, regardless of kind of the structure there, someone's got to be home with those kids. So that right there has been something that I find a really unique shift as far as like who our graduates are. You have women, but you also have like these ideas of schedules and things like that. Beyond that, the other thing that I find really fascinating that I think surprises a lot of people is only about 9% of our graduates nationally are legacy students, which means to me that they have a family member in the business. So they're kind of coming in with this idea of, I'm going to take over from mom or dad or aunt or uncle or whatever that might be. I think a lot of people think that this is kind of a family business, right? That, you're born into this and this is what you will do. And that was really our student and for a long time. Last year, we were about 15% that were legacy students. We jump now to 9%. So that number is starting to decline. And I think that's because what that really means is that the people coming in don't have the same background in funeral service that a lot of the other graduates previously did. So they're coming in kind of blank slates, which I think is exciting. But at the same time, when we think about that, that also says a lot. And what we're finding is only about 30% of our students when they start out have any experience in funeral service or anything like that. And by the time they graduate, only about 70% of our students have had some type of funeral home experience. That means approximately 30% of our students coming out, graduating nationally across the country, have never stepped foot in a funeral home. So that's wild when you think about it, because this is also a profession where they kind of want you like ready to go. You graduate, you have the degree, and then they're kind of like this expectation that snap your fingers and here we are. And
here we
we're fully
are.
professional.
You can answer the phone, do arrangements, casket, a decedent, everything. I know.
And some of them have gone in maybe like a virtual casket selection room, but they haven't maybe gone into a real one. The other piece of that too is that only about 50% of our students have come in with work experience. And that means, and I mean by work experience, I mean folding clothes at the Gap. I mean scooping ice cream.
Anything.
Any job.
Oh,
wow. Yes. And you might say, well, why is that? And this is because a lot of this younger generation, their parents said, you know what? I want Brandolyn to be a kid. I want my child to have the experience of being a child and grow up. There's plenty of time for work. So, and that's wonderful. But
Yeah.
so all of those things where, you've had those summer jobs where you're yelled at or whatever it might be. And you
Yeah,
make the
scooping
mistake.
ice cream and you mess it up and get fired. Yeah.
Yes. All of those things.
Yeah.
They haven't had that experience. So they're coming out
Right.
and their job is with the funeral director, and the funeral director is thinking they've had these experiences and they have not. So their first job, they're trying to put on a suit. And let's also talk about that too. Like, they're young and they're putting on that first like ill-fitting suit, right? It's just, and then we think about that. You take a step back and you go, no wonder there's this kind of tension and clash between the different generations and what's going on, because, right? Because there's this huge gap.
It's a huge gap because, and I also think, to their credit, they also have a lot more tools in their toolkit as a younger generation, being iGen, just naturally more intuitive with technology, but maybe not any type of mentorship or skill development on the soft skills.
Yes.
And, overall polite younger generation, eager to kind of help people, be of service. And I just don't think that they have any of the direction to harness that energy to help, but I think it's all there with them.
It is. And that to me is the exciting piece. And this is what I say all the time, is that, look, they can be taught. If you look at us, like, I like to say myself, like, I'm not a drooling millennial. At some point in time, like, we get it together, and if we're taught, we can make it work. But I look at this and I go, you said it so perfectly right there, which is this. They have this enthusiasm and they want to be that. But what they don't have is kind of this, sometimes the ability, and I call it almost like this, a little bit of grit and a little bit of like, how we talk about it, because they're not used to kind of, it's not that they're not used to being told no. They're just not used to like that kind of like disappointment and confrontation and different things like that. Because a lot of times their schooling and everything like that has been building them up. It's, if you think about it, if you have kids or anything like that, what are we always telling them? Like, self-confidence. You can do anything. You got this, right? We really have this like culture of building our children up, which is great. Yeah. But then when we kind of get into the workplace, a lot of times it's like, well, who do you think you are? What? Like, you need to be brought down. You need to be brought down a notch, right? You need to put in your dues. So that's very jarring when that's kind of your first job and your whole life has been told, like, you're amazing. You put forth that effort. You did great, right? And they get out there and like, you don't know anything about anything. Why are you here? Like, you better put in your dues.
Welcome to the next 40 years of your life.
Right. And so they go like this, what's happening? And then you know what they do? They immediately call their mom and they go, Mom, you're not going to believe what happened. And then you know what their mom's going, you don't have to take that. How dare they? We'll find you a new job. And so you have this kind of like loop. And I think that's why you start to see, millennials and kind of Gen Z, they move jobs more than any other generation previously, about a year and a half. And then they jump from job to job. And I think it's interesting, even something like that. To me, that's onboarding. And I think if you look at it, your boomers, it was kind of like the older generation. It was, here's the door, here's your desk, enjoy, right? And that was onboarding. Then you get to like Gen Xers and things like that. And it's about a 3-month onboarding process. And if you look at that, a lot of like legal stuff, it's like, how long is kind of your trial period? Usually a month to 3 months. That's very in trend with kind of your Gen Xers. Your millennials and everyone like that, if you look at it, you're looking at about a year of onboarding. And if you think about it, that makes sense that they're jumping at about a year and a half. So they've tried to learn it. And what is onboarding for a lot of funeral homes? It's, you know what? Here's the bathroom. There's the arrangement room. You good? We're good. Here are the keys.
Listen to Mary next to you when she answers the phone, and then listen to her for 4 days and then start answering on Friday.
Yes. And that freaks them out. That freaks out 100%. The younger generation, because they're like, I don't know, I can't do this. And then
because they think they're going to fail because they want to deliver good service. And it's like, well, you're supposed to be my teacher that gets me ready to pick up that phone. And it's like, well, the older person is saying, hey, there's nothing that can replace really valuable experiences, including falling on your face a few times.
Yes. And I think that, even something as simple as like answering the phone. Let's take that, for example. I am of the generation that when we had a landline, so when someone called, I knew how to answer the phone. We had a little notepad by the thing. Also, an answering machine. You had to take down all the information, right? So that was kind of ingrained in us. It was taught, like, you answer hello, so-and-so residents, no, they're not home, and take a message, all of that stuff. Now, fast forward to right now. I have, like I said, 2 daughters. If my cell phone rings, my children are not picking up that phone. If they do, and would you even imagine picking up someone else's cell phone to answer it for them? You wouldn't do that. That's not something you would do. Beyond that, our younger generation, when they have the cell phone, everyone's names and numbers are already programmed into it. So as soon as that phone rings, when they get this and they just go like, hey, what's up? Right? Right? Because they know who's calling. So they don't need to ask that question of who is this? And it's funny because that's why they'll say, like, you know, you get a text message and it's like, hi, hon, it's mom. How are you? And they're like, no, mom, I know it's you. Like, you don't need to tell me. It pops up. So we take that and then go into the funeral home, and they're expected to know how to answer the phone, and they've never had to do that. So something as simple as what is the script? How is it that we have an interaction on the phone? You need to go through those things with them. Now, if you go through that with them and practice it and they're not getting it, they're a bad employee. And guess what? Those exist in every generation. But if you give them the skills and like have them practice and do that, that's what we do. And that's something we started here at the college. So now all the students have to do 5 first calls. They're on call, so they know they're going to get a call within a certain time period. They've got to answer that phone call. First one is super simple, like very clearly. We tell them all the information. We'll spell things out very slowly, like we're very nice to them. By the second one, you know, we'll call and say something like, you know, my brother died, and they'll say, I'm sorry for your loss. And as soon as they say something like that, we go, no, you're not. You don't even know my brother, right? So we start to put them on edge a little bit.
Yeah. Curveball. That's the best, Lily. Yeah.
By the 5th call, it is a nurse who has no time for you or anything like that. She spits out that doctor's name faster than you can even imagine. It's got more syllables than you can possibly imagine. And you are like, what? Usually they cry. And that's the thing too. Our students usually cry within one of those first 5 calls with us, and we're not even scary. Right? So now imagine that, and they're not doing that at a school, or they're listening in on a first call, and then they come out to you, and it is like they're going to look at it and go, I just don't want to answer the phone. Somebody else will answer that phone. And then the funeral director is going like, what are you doing? This is part of the job. What are they teaching you at these schools, right? I don't understand what's happening. You have to answer the phone. And so that starts to build in that tension. And that starts to build in kind of that resistance between like the director and kind of your newer employees as well too. And something as simple as you just need to learn how to answer the phone.
Yeah. So 2 things. I think 1, I can imagine the old school traditional funeral home owner listening to this and just gritting his teeth as you explain these new students. But my actual question is, one of the things you mentioned was about 30% have never even had work experience, and then the higher percentage have never stepped foot in a funeral home. Why are people choosing funeral service then? Why are these students coming in?
That is such a great question, honestly, because it's fascinating. Because every single student has to write an essay of like, why funeral service? And I read every single one because I find it interesting. You know, why? Why would you find this? How did you find this? And what I've kind of identified is there's a couple kind of groups. One, have had some type of like transformative experience, and I believe that they're almost trying to work through grief. So they kind of believe like this might help them to do that, which is a terrible idea because that is not what this job does. Like this is a profession. So you're learning how to do a job, not necessarily working through grief. I think sometimes people think that those things are related. The other is that they have read a book. Usually it's by Caitlin Doty, or they've seen something on Instagram and they're like, oh, that's kind of cute. I could look good in scrubs, you know? And so they're coming into this with this very kind of, and here's the thing too, I'm not here to talk about, you know, whether that's right or wrong. But what I find really interesting is that they're coming in with real misconceptions about what the job actually is, because a lot of those things are snapshots in time, or they are a perspective that's kind of put through the lens of an author, you know, or they're kind of looking at it through that perspective. Where we're not finding a lot of our students coming from are funeral directors kind of saying to them like, hey, you could do this job, or they're shadowing or things like that. My best students, though, are the ones that a funeral director told them, hey, you can do this. And if you think about this makes sense because this younger generation, they're so looking for mentorship and they're so looking for that kind of like connection. So if someone believes in them, like a funeral director, they'll take that and run with it. The number one reason why millennials and Gen Z stay at a job is their boss. So that's the same for getting them into a profession as well too. So you're seeing this like real uptick, and they're coming in and they don't have kind of the necessary ideas of what it even means to be a funeral director. So they're kind of finding it by accident. A lot of times. What I would love to see is that the reason why they came, our number one reason would be, hey, I interned at a funeral home, or I had a summer job at a funeral home, or I walked into a funeral home, or I know a funeral director in my community and he or she is wonderful and I thought I could do this job as well too. That number needs to rise because that's going to be the key to retention. Because otherwise you could read the book, come to school, and make the marks and graduate and pass the national board exam. And then you get out in the field and you're like, whoa, this is not what I thought at all. And then go, oh, should I stay in this? So I think that kind of having that realistic approach, and I think that's where funeral directors could do a great job of opening the doors and being more open. It's funny to me because we have a lot of funeral directors that are saying, I can't hire anyone, there's no one out there. But as soon as a student calls them to say, hey, can I come and shadow? Can I come and learn more about them? Mm-hmm. They're the first ones to say no. They're the first ones to say, oh, I don't know, absolutely not. And I don't know, sometimes I think it's because they think that maybe the students are coming in and are going to look at it and say, well, why are you doing this? That's wrong. Or maybe they just don't want to take that on. But that kind of right there, that belief in a student, and a student to mentor, not a student to work until they absolutely can't do anything else, right? Because that's also the thing too. You don't take on an intern to do all the things you don't want to do. Right? That's just also not it either. So there has to be a better balance, but you're absolutely right. They're coming in for really different reasons. And we need to kind of swing that pendulum to hey, I actually know a funeral director, or hey, I know something about this job, because otherwise we're trying now to add that into the education, and the education's already really jam-packed. So we're already doing a lot and teaching a lot. And, I'm sure even sometimes anyone listening to me, it's you might go at a certain point, we've heard your voice enough, want, right? The students hear that too. And they'll go, I'll get it when I get to my job. So we need to be better, I think, about talking more about what we do. The other thing that I would love is think about this. We need more forward-facing campaigns as far as what it means to be a funeral director. Because if you really think about it, what are your images of a funeral director? When you think of funeral service in the media, when you think about it on TV, movies, things like that, if you start to say things like 6 feet under, most of our students, that's too old for them. They haven't even seen it. So where are they even getting an idea of what it means to be a funeral director? What are the images? And you think about that. How would you identify a funeral director? Those are really important questions. If you ask that question for a lawyer, a doctor, a nurse, anything like that, there are enough images and ideas out there that you can kind of formulate what that job entails. How would you do that with a funeral director? That's hard.
I have a question about that, because I think a lot of those images with regards to funeral directing is centered around images, stale images of guys in black suits, and also embalming. Mm-hmm. And I know that you talked about with the education and curriculum at Worsham and around the country, there is a focus on embalming. And I wonder, do you think that is headed for change? Do you think that needs to change? This is from personal experience. I was not a mortuary student. I did not graduate from a mortuary college. I became a licensed funeral director and had no history of embalming and never did it. My funeral directing was mostly grief and counseling based and arrangements based, not any type of care center work. Mm-hmm. What can you speak to that?
That's a really great question. And I love it, actually. So I think it's so interesting because when I think about our curriculum and I think about kind of all the things that we cover and everything like that, embalming is a part of it. But I think that it's important to kind of look at what does it actually entail from a mortuary college. What that means is that if a student graduates from an accredited mortuary science program, it means they've completed 10 embalmings total in their entire career and education. It also means that they've either taken maybe a semester to max 2 semesters of embalming. And that can be broken up however the school wants. Most schools maybe do only 1 semester of it. So I think it's important to kind of note that I think people think that's what we do a lot of. And it is certainly a cornerstone and a foundational piece. But I think what it is in the mortuary schools is when we talk about the job that we do, it all centers around the deceased. And it all centers around that without that individual, without the dead person, there is no profession. There is no job. So I think that kind of reframing it, that the idea that yes, embalming, restorative art, all those pieces are things that we teach and that are important. But if you were to ask our students what they spend most of their time doing, that is just part of the education. And when you think about that, literally 10 cases to kind of meet the requirement to graduate, most people are not even close to proficient after that. That is just kind of understanding how things work, right? And being able to move through it. So I think there's something about that, because I think understanding all of the aspects of it are really important, whether or not you plan to be kind of like, all I want to do is be in the back room. The other thing too is most of our students want to do a little bit of both. They want to understand it. And I think also when you're younger too, you don't even know where you're going to end up. So being able to have that background, being able to do both, yes. But to your point, as far as like what they see as the embalmers, I think you're right. There is this real focus on that where that is about such a small percentage of what we do. It's important. We need to know how to do it. But it's so much of the time is with people and paperwork and doing the arrangements and things like that, and kind of working with people and understanding family dynamics and situations and being able to read a room, being able to just kind of make announcements. Mm-hmm. What I always find fascinating is being able to find rapport with people after they walk in and you don't know them, and trying to find a point of commonality within that first few minutes to let them trust you because they've never met you, and then figuring out what it is that they need and putting together all of that with like within the snap of a finger, right? Like that's crazy when you think about all that you have to kind of accomplish. And being able to like understand the science piece of it is also really important. And I think it helps make a better funeral director. You know, I think it helps just kind of like help to inform it. But I don't think that it's necessarily that that's all that we do. But it's fascinating because that's what's portrayed as what we do, right? So you want to be a funeral director, like, oh, you're probably going to like, you probably like dead bodies. You probably want to hang out with them. And it's like, what? Like, I always find it funny too. People come to like see the school. And actually my sister came and did a tour, and, you know, I was showing her everything, and she goes, oh my gosh, everyone looks so normal here. And I go, what did you expect?
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Right? Because it's funny because like immediately people think, oh my gosh, they're morbid.
Yeah, Wednesday Addams walking around everywhere.
Right. Yeah. They're all like, you know, I mean, I know I have the dark hair, but like for the most part, it's like, oh my gosh, they're goth, or they have this or that, or they'll say like, you know, all. That's not it at all. Like if you go to any of these things or you see any of the funeral directors, like nobody, like that's not who does this job at all. It really is kind of just like a person that has like empathy, compassion. That's usually like can handle a lot at one time, you know, is able to kind of juggle and think, and actually really enjoys working with people, but also enjoys kind of challenges at the same time. It's one of those jobs where every day is a little bit different. And I love that because you never know. You never know what the family's going to want, what they're going to throw at you, how many obituary changes they're going to need at the last minute as soon as you send that in and go, did we get everything right? Everything's good. And then like at 10 o'clock, they're like, actually, if you could change that one more time, you know, like it's all of that. But so much of it is working with people.
Yeah, totally. I know that you guys do change your program, but you still only have a limited time. And, you know, working in the workforce is invaluable when it comes to, you know, really understanding the job. So if I was a funeral director or a funeral homeowner, and I was like hiring a new student, what do you think my expectations should be to actually getting, you know, like what more education do you think I need to give them? And how long do you think I should give them before I'm like, okay, this is working out or it's not working out?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, what I really look at is, first of all, funeral homes really need to think about a couple of things. Number one, compensation. And I think it's important that we mention that as well, too, because part of education and part of all of that is that your students are coming out with more degrees and more education than any other previous generation. Most of your students with mortuary science education are coming in at about the debt load of about $35,000. And that's got to get paid. And that's not just mortuary school. Most of them have like a bachelor's degree. I think about 30% of our students have bachelor's degrees, but 60% have at least 2 years of education in addition to mortuary science. So number one, compensation. You get what you pay for, honestly. So that's number one. And one of the things I recommend to funeral directors is this. When is the last time you really did the comps of where you live? So what I mean by that is, what does it cost to rent in your area? You know, we get kind of disassociated. Sometimes we don't think about those things because we just do it, right? Or you own your house or whatever it might be. What does rent cost? What do groceries cost? When's the last time I went grocery shopping? I went there, a box of cereal was $7. I do not know what is happening, but I was like, that is ridiculous, right? Like, what is that? So what does it cost to go grocery shopping? Internet, car, gas, cell phones, all the 100%. Things that you want them to have. So number one, figure out what that number is. Because that's when we get asked that question all the time. What should I be paying? What should I be paying a new director? What you can afford, but what you can afford, you really need to think about, because you need to be able to pay your bills. The student of today wants to make a living wage. They want to have growth and they want to be able to have stability, but that does not come at $15 an hour. And I don't care what the license is or whatever you want to call it. That does not come at $15 an hour. So that's number one, compensation. Number two is figure out what it is that you need them to actually do. And then think about all the job tasks that you want them to be able to accomplish and what it is. Do not just say they need to be able to do everything. That is not good enough. You need to really take a step back and figure out, what does this job entail? And then from that, you need to start to look at what skills do they bring to the table, because everyone's going to bring something a little bit different. I also think that what we have to do is think about what do we talk about all the time with like the families that we serve, and what's the big hot button that we're always talking about, this and that. It's personalization, right? Right? We're always like, oh, we got to personalize it, not cookie cutter, not this. The same thing goes for your employees. The same thing goes. So if you're thinking about what it is that new employee needs, it's got to be personalized to them. What are the skills that they're bringing? If they're really good on the phone already, you don't need to spend a ton of time on them working on the phone part of it. So what you need to do is spend some time with them, because you, as the manager, director, all that thing, you need to assess your new employee and figure out, what are they good at? Because they're going to have a wildly different assessment of what they're good at. Probably they're going to think they're good at everything, right? Coming in like, I got this. I'm good at everything.
Yeah.
So you need to watch them. You need to spend time with them. You need to go, okay, you know what I see? That was kind of rough on the phone, or that was kind of, your greeting with the family wasn't quite what I wanted. You turned bright red and looked like you were going to throw up before you had to like tell them how to get to the parking lot, right? Like, so where are they at as far as like those types of things? It's that piece of understanding them and then individualize that education to them. And to me, what a lot of that education is spending time with them. And I know people are like, I don't have time for that. I really don't. Then you really don't have time for a new employee. Like that to me is it's time.
I think that's accurate. And I think this is also kind of a, for lack of a better phrase, come to Jesus moment for owners and managers, where they need to look in the mirror and say, wow, I think it's really time that we audit our onboarding process. Does it even exist? And if it doesn't exist or it's not robust enough, you need to really think critically about how you like things done and build out that process so that it's repeatable for anyone, but especially this younger generation that wants that instruction manual, like we talked a little bit about last time. Write it out and give pictures.
Yes.
Meet them exactly where they are in terms of teaching them what you want to do. And it's going to save you a lot of time in teaching. It's going to get them up to speed a lot faster. And should there be any turnover in the future, at least you have something in place that you can go to make that next onboarding practice a lot faster and better for the next person.
Absolutely. And you said something so great in that too, which is this. I always say this, you got to spend time ahead of time before you bring somebody in. Because if you're making it up as you go, that's going to be really tough. Now, that doesn't mean you don't adjust it as you go, but you need to start to think about, to me, what I say is this. Think about your non-negotiables. What makes your funeral home your funeral home? What are the things that matter to you? Whether it's communication, whether it's dress code, whatever it is, you have to have a couple things. Number one, you have to know your why. So why is it that you're doing something? So for example, if something like one of the things that I heard newer employees, they get frustrated with is that if they don't have like forwarding to their cell phones, right? They're like, no, someone has to be on site all the time to answer the phone. That's important. So if that's important to you as the funeral home, you need to be able to explain yourself, because this is the generation that actually grew up saying, well, why? Why do I need to do that? Question everything, right? That's what we were told. Question it all. So if you are saying that's how we've always done it, you're going to lose that employee and you're going to lose credibility with them as well too. So you got to figure out what matters to you. Can I write the obituary from home? Can I do that? Can I take a laptop and do some work at home? Is that okay? If it's not, why? Why do you need me physically there to do this? Can I scan photos at home? Can I write the obituary at 2 a.m. and then send it? Whatever it might be. You've got to understand that like they're looking at their schedules differently. And if you have something that's really important, whether it's answering the phone on site 24/7, whether it's, a process that you have in place, you better be able to explain it and the importance of it, because you'll get the buy-in. Your new employers have to understand your story, and they have to understand how they fit into your purpose and how they're going to move things forward, because this younger generation wants to make an impact. They want to make a difference. And funeral service is perfectly poised to do that, because every day we get to make a difference. Every day we're helping people. So that's what they want. And they want that feeling of connection and community and all those different things. And they want to feel moving it forward. But if you're telling them that's how we've always done it, they'll lose it.
it's poor leadership, and now it's really like it's getting its comeuppance.
Absolutely. 75% of your workforce in 2025 will be millennials and Gen Z. 75%. So exactly as you said it, you don't have a choice. You can stomp your feet and say, I don't like these new employees. You can do that, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And even something as simple as in your handbook, you mentioned it with the pictures. I told you this when we talked before, which is if you have a handbook that just says, closed-toed shoes and pants, great. Okay. But I'll tell you what, they will absolutely show up in Uggs and floral pants. And if that's not what you thought that was going to happen,
Right.
then you need to give them an example of something to look at and think they're the generation. We're that generation that grew up in McDonald's with like the value meals. Like, I want that one. I can see that picture. I can do that. We love Instagram or kind of like, less text and more visuals. I can make something look like that and go, okay, that's what you want me to wear. I can figure that out. But if you're going to have something that just says, and closed-toed shoes, something as simple as that, which should make sense. I really did have someone come to the funeral home in Uggs once. It's a true story. And I there was that moment where I looked at it, I thought, is she doing this on purpose? Like just to mess with me? Because she saw closed-toed shoes. And that's the thing too. Like, I'm a real funeral director as well too. So I understand, like, I know some of the things I'm saying and you're hearing, you're going, this generation, what's going on? But here, like, this is a real thing. She comes in Uggs and I look at that and I go, oh my God, like these are like slipper boots. Like, what are you doing? And so I had that moment where I thought, is she just being like willful? Like, is it just being like, something where you're like, I can't do this or anything like that? And so I look at that and I go, so I talked to her and I said, these are great shoes. They look really comfortable. Wish I had a pair. And she's like, oh my gosh, do you like them? And I was like, yeah, they're great. But, why are we wearing these? And she goes, oh, well, closed-toed shoes. I said, but that's not the type of closed-toed shoe that needs to be in the prep room, right? Like, that's something we need to make sure we have safety, all those sort of things. She turned bright red and was mortified. She had no idea. And it was something that just had to be kind of explained. And guess what? Next time she came in closed-toed shoes that were perfectly appropriate for everything that we were doing. But I had to explain that to her. And again, I look at it a lot of times, it's that education piece. It's that thing of where are they modeling that behavior after? What have they seen? What are they looking for? So giving them that opportunity. Now, if she showed up the next day with Ugg boots on again, we have a problem, right? Because then she's not getting it and it's not a good employee. But if you explain it to them and kind of work with them, a lot of times they want to be better and they want to know what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It sounds like there is a pretty big divide between the new workforce and maybe the old employers. And, I would love to say that like a podcast like this can help change a bunch of minds. And I mean, it may, but as an overall more macro look at this, how do we actually bridge that gap in a wide scale way to make, deathcare not die?
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It's small steps. It's small things that make a difference because each employee that you retain and that stays in the field is what keeps us going. And also realizing that I think there's two things that I would say is don't forget why you got into the field. What's fascinating to me is that all the students that are coming in here, and as I said, most of them are finding us by a book, whatever they've seen or anything like that. They want to be funeral directors. They want to be in that position. That's what they've worked toward. They've gone to school. They've passed like the national board. They've gone through so much to get to that position and they come into their job. And if you're met with, why are you doing this? Which I can't tell you how many funeral directors say things like that, or that they are burnt out themselves, or that they are just spent, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The new generation coming in, they don't want that. Like if you come to work and someone's like, why are you here? Why would you do this? This is a miserable job. Who wants that? So number one, don't forget why you got into this field. And again, I understand more than most, not every day is sunshine and rainbows, but you come to this job because you love it, because you were called to it. It is something that is, you give back and there is so much more to it. You can't forget that. And you can't forget your story and your why, because that's what's going to inspire that generation. So that's the first part of it. And then the other part of it is understanding that just because they are coming in with a different attitude and kind of a way of doing doesn't make it wrong. So something as simple as this, when they're asking you why do you do it like that? I always find it interesting. Oh, why is your GPL like this? Let's take that something example like this. Why is your GPL like that? Funeral directors 9 times out of 10, their first reaction is, why do you think you know everything? It is what it is, right? Here's the thing. A lot of times those young people are coming in and they're actually curious. So don't mistake that why for undermining your authority, but instead see it as someone that's actually interested in what you're doing. Because here's the thing, a lot of times that might be the first real GPL that they've ever held or touched. So they might be just asking that question. Or they might say to you, oh, in the textbook, it doesn't say that. Why do you embalm like that? Or why do you do it that way? Why do you use that in particular? And it's because all they've ever seen is maybe 10 cases total. They've seen their instructor do it. They've read it in a textbook. And you, as the director, are the first person they're seeing it doing it in real time. Oh, why did you introduce yourself that way? Oh, why did you say this? And think about it like the little toddlers, right? Why? They're excited. They're asking those questions because they want to know more. So don't stifle that curiosity and that excitement and enthusiasm. Instead, foster that, because that to me is how we start to do that. So you have to come to work happy to be there. You have to come to work going, you know what? I'm excited to teach this young generation. And yet, don't get me wrong, there are days where you're like, not today. But you have to come in overall with that attitude, right?
I think you're really speaking to the need for real leadership in the workplace, like framing all those questions as an opportunity to instill your culture in that new employee.
Absolutely.
Rather than like start the process of beating them up or beating them down. And because with this generation, they're just not going to take it.
Yeah.
You're going to lose your credibility and lose what little respect they had for you, like to start. And you don't want that to go. And if that's gone, then they resent you and they're already looking to leave, whether it's that position, that company, or the industry as a whole. And why would you want that?
Absolutely. I say it like this too. I think about it. When you start a new job or a new endeavor or anything like that, you start off, and I kind of say your jar is full, right? You're like full and it is like everything's exciting and you can't wait. Nobody starts off a job going, I can't wait to leave, right? Like nobody, nobody's like, I can't wait to get fired. I can't wait to quit. Like that's insane. Nobody does that. They start off and they're like, oh, I'm so excited. Like they celebrate. But then what happens is life happens over time. And that jar gets slowly kind of like depleted. And if we're not putting back into that with feedback, with constructive criticism, with kind of growth and development and networking and all of those things that fill us up, you're going to get depleted. And guess what happens? When you hit about that, like only about a quarter of your jar left over, they're going to leave you because they don't care anymore, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be the ones that don't even text you. They're going to ghost you and just leave. And they're going to go, I don't need to get here on time because it doesn't really matter. They don't notice what I do anyway. One of the things that we found like with our students, I started to kind of track them to see who's staying in the profession. And I'm starting to find about 50% of our students leave within 5 years. I found it really fascinating because I want to know why. What was it like? And more than the number one cited thing was that nobody was noticing what I was doing, right? Good or bad. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, I wasn't getting any feedback. I wasn't feeling like I was progressing. I wasn't feeling like that there was any type of growth. And it doesn't mean growth in the sense of, I need more titles and I need this or that. They meant growth as far as them and their progression of them learning the job, that they were kind of just like stuck into it. And then they weren't seeing how they were making an impact and there was no feedback and no direction. That's why they were leaving.
I saw that myself. I'm sure you've seen it. This is with any human being, if they're not cultivated by some sort of leadership and mentorship, again, not even with regards to promotions or like salary increases, but just taking that time to have a one-on-one. It's like, hey, we talked about this last month. These things were going well. These things weren't going well. Let's talk about both of them. Where are we now? At least, that person has some sort of rubric to judge their professional development by, and someone taking the time to spend 30 minutes with them to discuss it. And a manager and leader that does that is going to have a better workforce every single month by taking the time to do that.
Yes. And you think about it, the funeral homes that don't do that, those are the employees that are the ones that go, well, I pretty much run the place. Boss isn't even here. They don't even care about what I'm doing, right? Even though that's not even accurate. And they have no idea what's going on because there's this disconnect between what the owners and the managers are doing. And there's no kind of communication between all those things. And that's someone, as soon as you hear that from an employee, their jar is depleted. Like they're looking at it going like, you know what? I pretty much do everything here. They just go off and do whatever. And 9 times out of 10, that's wildly inaccurate. But they don't have any kind of basis in what's actually going on. So they're creating their own narrative and their own story. Yeah. And then guess what?
They have all the space in the world to do so because there's no other formal feedback loop in place to curtail that and bring that back to reality. Yeah.
The owners
100%.
and managers, you get to create the narrative. It's your funeral home. Own that. Like, what is it?
Right.
What is your story? Why do people want to work there? What is it about you that makes you want to have people? And don't be a reluctant leader. I think that's the other thing too I see with a lot of our funeral directors. Like, well, why would they want to talk to me? Why do they want to know from me? Because guess what? You are the leader. You are in that position. And leader does not mean that they just tell people what to do.
Right.
Leaders can come in all different formats and all different ways of being. A lot of times a leader is just someone that's able to listen and be able to kind of formulate what are the next steps and being able to kind of set a tone and a trajectory. A leader does not necessarily mean you're just yelling at people and barking orders. It doesn't mean that you micromanage. What it does mean is that you look at your team and where they're at and you can identify their skill sets and you put them in places where they're going to shine and do well. So a lot of that's observation and then making sure you're communicating. That can be done over a cup of coffee in the break room. It doesn't
100%.
have to be something that is so formal where on every day on the 5th of the month, we're having a meeting. Don't have a meeting just to have a meeting. What you want to do is like care about your employees. You should know what are their dogs' names, right? Like what makes them happy? What are the different things that matter to them? Because if you know that, that's building a culture. And that's how you kind of keep filling that up so that you have that retention where they stay. This is a great profession. It's tough. This is a hard job.
Yeah.
This is a hard job. It is not for everyone. It is not for the faint-hearted, right? Like in whatever capacity that you do.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly rewarding. Like I love what I do. But I also know like as the owner of a funeral home, as the owner of this college, like it's me. So guess what? I am there and I show up and I do a lot of the work. And guess what? All my employees see me working. They know my story. And you know what they'll say about me? And they'll say, yeah, she's transparent. Like we know what's going on. They should say the same thing at your funeral home. They really should. That idea of transparency, what that means to me is that means that there's a connection, that they believe in what you're doing and they understand the goal because I'm not hiding anything from them. There's nothing that we need to hide. Like they need to feel part of that fabric of what you're building.
Right. 100%.
Totally.
100%.
So you mentioned that 50% after 5 years seem to have left the industry. How many do you think? I mean, and naturally there's going to be people that leave, even if it is the greatest profession in the world and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But
50% is a lot.
What do you think that could be that as owners in death care should strive for?
The reasons that I hear feedback, number one. Number two, burnout. And here's what burnout is to this younger generation, because it's interesting, because people are going, how are they burnt out? We had a great candidate. He was awesome and just exactly who you'd want to hire. But here's the thing. He was good. So guess what they kept doing? Work him. Right?
Yeah.
Just another week, because he was really good. And he was saying yes because he wanted the experience. He wanted all that. And this was fascinating to me because he left because he goes, you know what? It had been 3 months since I went to church. It wasn't, I didn't get to go out with my friends. It wasn't that I didn't have all my nights and weekends off or anything like that. It was 3 months and he hadn't been able to go to church one time. And that to him was a huge piece. And guess what? He's now like working as a principal at a high school. He's not afraid of hard work. He's not afraid of like doing the job. But it was because he was good that they kept going, you know what? We just need you one more week. If you could just help us out this one more time. And this was actually at a corporate firm. So this wasn't even, because I think we think of that more on like the family run side where it's like all hands on deck.
No, it's both.
It's both. And so we have to honor the schedules that we give, because that's, to me, the burnout piece. And the good employees in the beginning, they want to give. And Will, you kind of said something in the beginning about this too. They want to be good. They want to prove themselves. So they're falling over themselves to be like, yes, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And then they just hit a wall and they're done. Right. And they
think they're being disrespected.
Yes.
You know, and this is when it comes to that funeral director, like when they ask why, whether it's about a GPL or how you answer the phone, and you can't give them an answer, and the answer that you give is, that's just how we do it. Well, it's not going to be very long before in their mind they say, well, I asked that question so that I can understand why we do that, because I expect that answer to be one of the reasons that we provide better service than other companies in our field. I expect that reason to be behind that, because obviously I want to work at a place that cares about how they serve families. And obviously every process, procedure, script, anything that we do would be based around that. But if then you hear from the leader that, oh, that's just the way we do it, and I don't really feel like changing it, then it's like, well, then you actually don't care about families. And that's what I'm here to do.
And that's the thing. So it's honoring, it's the feedback, it's the schedules. The other thing that I see too is also, is making sure that they feel valued, right? That they feel a part of what you're doing and that they understand kind of like all of that. And, the other thing that we were noticing too is compensation, that it was over time. I think a lot of them don't mind at first. Like, yes, we've got like apprenticeship year and stuff like that. No, you're going to, you're not going to make as much. But then afterwards, there should be some type of like compensation or pay bump or something like that. Because you know what, like they need to see value in that as well too, that they're being compensated and that there is some type of growth there as well too, that they don't feel like, what have I done? Like why am I putting in 60 hours a week or whatever it might be? And then I run the numbers and I'm making less than minimum wage, right? I mean, like you're not going to keep somebody at that because it's not sustainable, and I think that's important.
Yeah. And especially in those obvious situations, and then like the not so obvious, be proactive about your transparency and compensation. Because if you're doing such an emotional job where burnout is a big factor, the last thing you want is someone going home and worrying about inflation and they can't put the work away. Now they just are stressed about their own personal life. They're not going to show up for you the next morning being ready for the phones, ready for families.
You know what else is really interesting that I heard a lot of our kind of new grads say that I thought was really fascinating is that one of the things that bothered them the most is when the funeral homes are saying we're a family. Both on the corporate side and like the individual, like on the family run side, is this idea that we're a family really bothers them because they're like, no, we're actually not. You actually no, like you're not. So it's interesting because for that younger generation, the words you use really matter. And so like, if you're going to be a family, then you got to be a family, right? But you can't say that without kind of having that actual background in it, because that actually builds a lot of distrust with them 100%. Right away. So even kind of the way you talk about what it is that you do, don't kind of give these like kind of platitudes and kind of just like general statements. You have to match up what you're doing because they're looking at that. So even something as simple as that. And I think we throw that around all the time. Oh, we're a family here.
I've seen it myself and they don't buy it. And why would they? It's like, no, we're not a family. Like you say that at a Christmas dinner, we're a family, or, at a, like in our one-on-ones or a big roundup, we're a family. But, if you're not proactively taking steps to meet with me, develop me, consistent pay bumps, or telling me that like, hey, these are the things that we're trying to offer you. These are the flexibility pieces that we're trying to implement for you, or, the productivity toolkits that we're developing and implementing so that you could do this rather than this and not spend so much time on things you don't like, then you're not really a family. You are just, and they're actually fine with that. Just don't misrepresent.
Right. Exactly. Just be who you are. Be transparent, right? Offer the things. The other thing too is that I found is don't make kind of a pathway for them that they don't necessarily want. I find that really interesting too. Like you could have this one day as an owner. 90% don't want to be owners. Like they're like, what? I don't want that. So being able to actually, and you said it there too, like, what is it that they actually want to do? When is the last time you had a conversation with your employees to find out what are they interested in? What does professional development look like to you? And here's the thing. A lot of times your younger generation might take a less of a salary to have more flexibility in their schedule.
100%.
They might absolutely do that. So if you're looking at it going, well, I just gave you a pay raise. Well, they might say, you know what? I would have taken less money, but had maybe like a more structured schedule. So don't kind of define for them what it is you think they want without having the conversation with them, and that also changes over time too. If you think about, as a director, where you are like now, think about yourself 20 years ago. Do you want the exact same things? No, of course you don't. Your life changes. So will your employees. So meet with them. And if you're doing that consistently, it's not this kind of like earth-shattering thing. It's like, you get to know each other over time and you get to see that, you get to see the growth in them. And also be excited for their growth. Be excited for their kind of accomplishments, because that also fills them up and makes them happy. That to me is, I love when people do stuff on like at the school and also the funeral home and they do something cool or great. Like I'm the first one that's like, that's amazing. And I don't look at it as like, where was your attention on Worsham College? Where was your attention on the funeral home? No, I look at that because it's like, that's a really cool accomplishment. And I see that makes them better at what they do because it's filling up them holistically, right? Instead of just 100%. Like just the funeral home and just the job.
And Lily, your point about, meeting with your employees consistently shouldn't go understated, because when you don't meet with someone consistently, then when they are a no call, no show, you're surprised. But if you're meeting with them,
Yes.
then you're like, oh, wow, I think this person might have a better opportunity, or it's not a good fit for them, whatever it is. At least then you can, hop on Indeed or ZipRecruiter and put those feelers out there so that you're not left in the lurch and you have a pulse on what's going on right underneath your nose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, there are certainly the shocks that happen when people leave and stuff like that.
Sure.
But for the most part, a lot of times it's not a surprise. If you really take a step back and look at the whole thing, you're given a lot of signs and a lot of opportunities along the way. And also, giving yourself some time to find the good employees that actually fit your own culture as well, too. Sometimes I think we wait too long to hire people because we're like, oh my gosh, and it becomes this desperation. So they take anybody and then they're surprised when anybody doesn't work out because they're not going to, right? It takes a long time to find that right fit because this is a different profession. We're together a lot at stressful times at all hours of the day and night. You need someone that fits with you and your attitude and how you run things. So that takes time too. And building in enough time so you're not in an emergency situation going, oh my gosh, I need to find anyone. Because I'll tell you what, anyone will not work. It just won't. It's not.
And you can't justify anyone too.
Yes.
I've been in that situation where you're desperate to hire. You didn't hire proactively. You're hiring reactively. Mm-hmm. And then you have a mediocre candidate. Yeah. And then you're in a meeting saying, well, they actually did give a good answer on this one question. Maybe they were actually, they're going to really surprise us. I can't wait. And then they don't. They're not.
But I think that's also being proactive in your business, though. What do you see 100%. Coming up ahead? What do you see in the next 5 years? What do you, as the owner manager, want to see accomplished in your business in 5-10 years? So, what is it, and how are you going to fill those gaps? What is the skill set that you need? If you just say, "I need a funeral director," well, you're going to get exactly that, bare minimum. What is it that you need? Is it someone that's really great in customer service? If it is someone that needs to be able to do everything, then you need to cultivate that talent and kind of work with it as well too. But you need to know what it is that you need as well, and who you're hiring, and what skill sets you want them to have. So that's also, putting it back on us as the funeral directors as well too. And I think we all feel that way. We got to be thinking about what's going to enhance our teams. What is the skill set that's missing or lacking and that we need to kind of add to it so that you have a really well-rounded group of people that you work with.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sometimes challenging, being that self-aware of what you're lacking. And having the ego to identify it or lack of.
I think that this is generally true for lots of different industries. I see it in ours. Usually there's no one checking the manager or owner, and there's no one under the roof that can say, hey, you know what? You're great in all these areas, but your lack of transparency here is something that I think you need to work on as my manager. Actually soliciting feedback as a leader is just something that a lot of people don't open themselves up to, but is often the only pathway of communication to make them better and actually understand what they're lacking as mentors and leaders and managers.
Absolutely.
And they're afraid. They're afraid of that criticism because maybe they think that they're supposed to know everything and just be, the savior of the entire, firm. But that's not how any of this works.
No. And honestly, we're all learning as we go. I think if anything, look at even just having the pandemic, right? We don't know everything. And that's okay. Every day was a little bit different as far as what rules and regulations and what everything looked like, and being able to pivot and do all these different things and run a business and do all that. You're not expected to know everything. And your staff understands that as well too. What they're really looking for is guidance. What they're really looking for is, which way are we steering? Where do you want us to go? Because we'll go, we just need to know. And having that confidence sometimes as kind of the owner or manager to say, I always say, look, I'm going to make mistakes, but I'll own them and then we'll fix it. Right? That's part of it. We don't know everything, and that's okay. And it's better to own that and be vulnerable and to kind of have that discussion with your new employees, because guess what? That's how they were brought up. So that's their expectation. They don't look at that as a weakness. And I think sometimes our older directors look at that as a weakness. Like if you don't have every answer and you're not kind of barking orders and kind of getting things ready, that somehow shows like a weakness, or that you're not as strong, or that your business might not be as solid as you thought. Really, for this younger generation, they've always had a seat at the table. They've been asked since the age of 2, like, what do you want for dinner? So the idea that their opinions and values and that they can be part of that structure, they've always been part of the structure. So, they're looking for that kind of buy-in, that they're part of it, and give them that. It doesn't mean you listen to everything they say and that you're changing your direction based on it. But what you are doing is having like real conversations.
Yeah.
And having like real buy-in and real value from that as well, too.
Yeah, a lot of what I've seen, or at least the sentiment that I've gotten, is that a lot of the original, or I would say like old guard, really wear that how bad of a time they had learning everything as like a badge of honor. And that if the others aren't learning by, trial by fire, like they're not going to get it and they're not going to be prepared.
Yes. Okay. That's such a good point. And think about it like this, though. So it's so fascinating. I love that you said that, because you're right. That's exactly what they do. Well, when I was back in the day, I did this. But think about this. All of your generation right now, they heard their parents say, what? I'm working this hard so you don't have to, right? I put in all this time and effort. I'm trying to make it better for my next generation. So I put in all this time and effort. I did all this so that my children have a better way. And then those children get into the workforce. And then that generation is saying, well, when I was that day, I had to do this. You got to put in your time and effort. And the thing is then they're going, but this doesn't reconcile with what I was told growing up, which was, I'm doing this so you don't have to. So even something as simple as that, you start that tension like right there. And that doesn't mean that they don't do the hard work. That doesn't mean they're not cleaning bathrooms, right? Like that's not what we're talking about here. But it's how we talk about those tasks. It's how we talk about the work. And it's how we kind of say, look, these things all matter, because it enhances the entire experience from start to finish.
It's like, well, I didn't get onboarded and it was tough. And that made me the funeral director I am today. So, you didn't like not being onboarded. So you're not going to develop an onboarding process so that everyone can be just as miserable and confused as you were.
Right.
So that,
exactly. It doesn't make any sense. Exactly.
That's not the way to think about it.
Exactly. And that's why it's like, those things can be done. And again, I think what I really find, what I say over and over again, is a lot of time, it's not so much that it takes a lot of money investment to do these things. It's time.
It's time.
And I understand sometimes that is actually the least thing that a funeral director has, because they are moving in 1,000 different directions and their plate is already so full. So they're going, I don't even know how you expect me to build it. Like, everything you're saying is great, right? Like, you listen to a podcast like this, go, that sounds lovely. All of it sounds wonderful. But where am I supposed to find the time to build this onboarding and to do all that? And here's what I would say to them is small steps, right? Small things. It doesn't have to be this kind of like overall, like tear it down and burn. Like, no, it's the small changes. So it's as simple as like, with the feedback and meetings, if you're not doing that right now, grab a coffee with someone, like buy lunch, right? Sit down and have like an impromptu meeting and just start to like build it out like that. Those small things make a difference. If you have a handbook, edit one section, just one.
Right.
It doesn't have to be kind of all or nothing. It's small steps. It's progress, not perfection. You will never have a perfect handbook. You will never have a perfect anything. You'll never have a perfect answer for everything that people are asking you, but you learn each time. The other thing that I will say is there's anything that you think is just common sense that someone should just know right away. It's not. I have come to learn that anything that you believe that is common sense, write it down and teach them that, because that is the first thing that will find you frustrated, and start with that. Also, you don't need to make some like formal mission statement that is like so out there and all of that stuff. All it has to be is just who you are. Be real and authentic. That's what people are attracted to.
100%.
They can feel that, and that's what we really need to work on. Is so it's not about revamping everything from start to finish and feeling overwhelmed, because it's very easy to do that. It is just the small pieces. What are the little things that you can do? It's sometimes as simple as like, get a gift card, surprise them, give them some feedback. Like, and again, it doesn't have to be anything huge. It can just be like, what? I saw this and I thought of you. One of the things that we do even here at the college, like, if someone says something really funny, like, like a student or, someone coming in says something kind of goofy or funny, we write it down and then we have a competition at the end of the week. Who got the like craziest message, right? And then we laugh. We have a good laugh about it, right? What does that take? Nothing, right? Like, it's just something that, and you know what it does? It brings us all together. We have a moment, we laugh about it, and then we move on. right? It's not big. It's just the little things that really do add up. So start small and go from there and don't feel overwhelmed by it because it's doable.
That's great advice, Lily.
So, Lily, we like to ask the same question to most of our guests. I think everyone brings their own perspective. They all have their own experiences, and I think it all shapes what they see for the future of death care. So what do you think death care looks like in 10 years? And maybe if you want, you can answer it as the owner of the mortuary college, but you could also maybe answer it as the owner of a funeral home.
Yeah.
I think in 10 years, what it will look like is just a much more individualized experience. And I think that from the perspective of someone that's going through the experience as far as like grieving and loss and all of that, they're going to have a very much like an individual experience as far as like what the expectations are and how they actually get services and things like that. As far as what death care looks like, I think for our students and for kind of the people coming forward is going to be, what are our skills and how do we enhance those? So I think we're going to move much more to a skills-based kind of education, looking at competency-based, like what is it that you can bring in, kind of enhancing those. So instead of kind of focusing on what people are not necessarily good at, I think what we'll start to do is really focus on what they're really good at. And I start to see like almost micro-credentialing and things like that as far as like, you know what, like I can see like a very specific, almost like a ranger training or different things like that start to like look at it in a different way so that we're giving people information where they're at. I also see that education doesn't necessarily stop. And I think that what we do is we see it from a perspective of not continuing education, because that to me, continuing education is something where that's almost something forced upon us. I think what we need to do is make education that people want to have, because think about it, we shouldn't stop learning. And there's so much that we can do and we can learn from each other. And I start to see almost like these more situations where you're learning from kind of experts in the field about things that you're interested in. And then you grow from there. So these kind of like more kind of smaller type course settings and things like that, where you're building out your skill set and you're going, I'd love to know more about this. So I'm going to jump in and learn more about, whatever that particular thing is. And then we grow from there. And we'll start to see almost more like badging and different credentials and things like that. And not to do it just to do it to like, say, oh, I got my 30 hours or I did this or I did that. Because I find that as soon as we start saying that, people are like not interested in that. So I see kind of this growth of information because think about how we digest information right now anyway. It's on demand and it's how we want it. And we do what we want to do, right? So we're not necessarily seeking out all these different things. So I see that kind of like a newer form of like continuing on to be curious and all of those things. So I think there's that piece of it. But I also think we're going to look at it and the families that we serve as a much more individualized experience and really starting to bring technology in ways that we haven't even imagined. You look at things like artificial intelligence and AI and what that's able to do beyond that, which is just remarkable. And I think that that's going to absolutely change the face of not just death care, but almost everything. In addition to that too, being able to really kind of customize what it means to have a funeral. And that there are so many ways to do that, and finding ways to like, I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but I get excited about this too, but finding ways almost to like, think about that all the options that we have and everything that we're able to do, but finding ways to describe that to families in a way that makes sense to them instead of like, here's your list of choices, right? That's overwhelming. Like that's overwhelming to most people. And they're going, I don't even know. Like
they don't even know what they're looking at either.
Right, exactly. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to find a way to like make that make sense so that people can use the technology that we have with audio, visual, all these different things that someone can look at that and go, actually, yes, that's kind of what I want. That's what I was thinking. And then understanding how that can be individualized for them. So I think we'll find technology kind of coming in more and more, which it does in every profession. We're just a little behind on that, but I think technology.
We're like a little behind.
Well, and even something as simple as like, I joke with the funeral homes, like everyone's website, y'all got to look different, right? Like if everybody has the same website because they're using the same kind of groups where like, the hands over in the tree and all that stuff, what makes you different? I think that we'll start to see that, right? I even say that's like your GPL. It's so funny to me. If I see like if they make us put GPLs online, okay, it doesn't have to be this horrible thing. Think about how we reimagine a GPL to make it more useful. Because otherwise, an individual that's never seen one before, they have no idea what they're looking at, and it looks terrible. So if you put your weird PDF up on your website, and then somebody else has the same thing, this is an opportunity. So I see the next 10 years as an opportunity to like reinvent And to understand that, you know what, there's differences in funeral homes, just like there's differences in doctors' offices and lawyers and all that different thing. It's the same thing in funeral service, and that's okay. Because we've always tried to normalize it, but I think there's going to be that leveling and that we understand that. And so, but what that means is funeral homes have to differentiate themselves. And I'm excited for what that looks like and how technology gets to do that as well, too.
I hadn't thought about that. I think we've had kind of this transparency with pricing action a lot over the last 10 years. And I think maybe what you're saying is a transition into communication transparency digitally.
Yes.
So make that website extremely interactive and easy, prices available, very easy to see, digestible information,
And adding the value, because that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, right? What is the value of the services of a funeral director? What is it? If you just give them that list of like what are the duties that you do, that doesn't mean anything to them, right? Does it would you read that? We know that the younger generation doesn't read, right? So they're going to go, this includes all these things. Okay, great. What does that actually mean? So show me, right? Show me. So, and I think that's what we'll start to see is this kind of like absolutely new revolutionary way to kind of understand what it is that a funeral director offers and why you would pick your funeral home rather than somebody else. So yes, there's transparency in pricing, but it's communicating the value of the differences in those prices. Why you spend more at some places than others. And I think that to me is going to absolutely change what we do here. And it's exciting. That to me is yes.
I agree with you so much on that statement, but I think that might be one of the most difficult things that we have to do right now is try to figure out how to, because you hear a lot, well, if I can sit down with a family for 30 minutes, I can get them to stay with us no matter the price, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that might be true, but the way people consume media and everything right now is you don't get 30 minutes, you get maybe 30 seconds. And so how does deathcare transition into really showing that value in 30 seconds in a easily digestible?
I find that wildly exciting. I really do, because that to me is exactly what the landscape is going to do, because that's what everyone has to do. It's not just funeral service and death. It's how do we remain relevant and how do we show our value? And so what does that look like? What do people value about their experiences with that? So to me, instead of having the interviews with people and the testimonials and things like that, take those testimonials, but how do we visualize that in a 30-second thing? How do we make someone feel what it is that we're doing? How is it that we go, this is what we can offer you with all visuals and kind of in that space, right? Because it's not necessarily just about the price. It's not about all those different things. There's so much more to that. Because here's the thing, people will spend money on what they value, if they value it, right? And we can see that in every kind of space, whether it's buying a car, whether it's, at a restaurant, whether it's a hotel, whatever it is that you do, there are different levels of value on everything like that. And then the people that you want to do, and it's understanding your market, it's understanding, but it to me is finding that new way to connect with people. I think that's so exciting. I mean, that to me is an opportunity, right? And if you figure that out, you're golden. And that's exciting. And I think that's what we're poised to do in the next 10 years. You think about it, this is going to look so different. And that to me, yes, why wouldn't you want to be a part of that? When do you get to see a profession really change? Because we were a little behind. The fact that we're still talking about the need for a website sometimes, that is mind blowing, right? That I can't even
cremation.
The fact that we're still talking about that, oh my gosh, what's so interesting to me is that our students are get over it. It's just a method of
it's about the family.
It is about the family. So you're seeing that, but that pendulum has to come around and it has to swing that way. And so that's what's going to happen. And whether you like it or not, it's just whether you like working with people like me,
pendulum or wrecking ball,
Absolutely. You know what? That's the truth of it. That's the truth of it. But that also, if you see if you love what you do, and you see that, you'll go, you know what? This is exciting. This is exciting.
You're not afraid of it. You're oh, wow. Finally something different.
Yes. And you get to see that, you get to be on that precipice of change. You get to be that one that gets to move things forward. When you look back and go, you know what? I remember funeral service when, that you get to say that and it means something. And that's what this generation gets to do. That's what the real change makers get to do in this generation. And that is exciting because it's a new consumer coming through too. Just as it's a new employee, that's your new consumer, you know? And what do they want? They want the same things that we just talked about. They want to know what they're buying has value to it. They want to know that they're actually, that if they're buying a funeral or whatever it might be, that there's value in that, and that what they see is that they're giving back as well too, that it matters, that they're not just checking boxes. They don't want to just do it because everyone's always done it, right? So if we take that same attitudes that we do with our new employees, and we think, oh, guess what? That's also your new consumer. That's also the new client family that you're going to serve. It's not as complicated as we have to make it. So I don't know. I don't think of things in a negative way. I just don't. That's just not who I am anyway. Yeah. So I get really excited, and I am, and I'm, this is literally how I act all the time. So if you see me most of the time I'll come to work, and one of my staff members, I walk by his office and he'll just see me and he goes, no, cause I'll start off, I'll go, I have an idea. And he goes, no, it's Monday. Can we hold off until Tuesday? But I think that's how you should be. You should get excited, and you should go, you know what, this is an opportunity for change, instead of being absolutely terrified about what happens next.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
I really like that answer.
Yeah. That's a proactive answer. It's a proactive optimist. That's what we need. Yeah.
Yes. It's okay.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. All right, Lily. How can people contact you? I know you have multiple channels.
You know what? Worsham College is easy, is really the best way. I'll certainly, I'll give you my email address and everything like that. But also, we're a small group over here at the college. Like, if you call the college, you get me on the phone. I'm usually like, what? Everyone's like, do you have an extension? No. I just... No.
Extension 1.
Yeah. It's like, they'll be like, are you really answering the phone? Yep, I do. That's always a great way to get me, is usually at the college. I will always say, look, if you don't get a response from me right away, I usually get a ton of emails. So please just email me again. It doesn't bother me at all. So email, call the college, whatever you need. And I love opportunities to collaborate and kind of see. I think that we should give our time and kind of give those opportunities to work together whenever we can. I also think that we are colleagues, not competitors. So it's the ideas can go across, and how we implement them and how you implement them will be very different, but we should give freely of our ideas and kind of share that space, and because we all benefit from that overall. And I believe that fully.
Yeah,
I agree.
No, and I will say, if you ever do get a chance to see Lily speak, because that's kind of how we met at one of these, I think it was the Cana show, the symposium. Mm-hmm. And, we saw Lily's talk, and it was really impactful. And I think it kind of probably started out how people are going to listen to this, is start off thinking like, why do we want to deal with these Gen Zers? And by the end of it, you have a much more empathetic view of the new workforce coming in, and probably takeaways that you can actually make.
Oh, big time. Might save your butt.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really do.
I think so. I believe that 100%.
Yes, if you do get a chance, I would highly recommend seeing Lily.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think this was a really good one. I can't believe we went this long. It didn't feel that long. Didn't feel that way.
Oh, it's fun, right? It's just nice talking to people. Lily. Absolutely. Yes. And honestly, exactly what you're doing too. Like, this is part of it. You don't have to do anything like this. You do this because it matters, and because it might make a difference to some people somewhere. And that's why we show up, and that's why we do these things. So I believe in it as well too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Lily.
Of course.
Thanks, Lily.
I am Tyler Yamasaki, along with my co-host, Will DeMichaelist. Thank you very much for listening. See you guys next time.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you ever want to know more, please find us at directcremation.com.